Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. Once again, here with me on the show is Chris Andresen, a good friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Angela.
And Chris, one of the things I love about having Chris on the show is she's always up for just about anything. I mean, I won't say anything, but if you know what I mean, fellas. But she's up for a lot. And one of the previous episodes that she did, we talked about all new movies. On this one, we're going the exact opposite way. Chris and I were chatting over email, and she said, there's all these classics I still haven't seen, and I said, great, let's do that. Let's do it. And I called it catching up on the classics. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, of course, a little bit easier for Chris to find some classics she hasn't seen than me,
There's
the
so
film
many.
snob that sees 300 to 400 movies a year, right?
Yeah.
However, even with me, I have 1,000 movies on my watch list on Letterboxd. Now, not all of those are classics. A lot of those are newer movies or cult movies or just weird horror movies from the 70s. But to be defined as a classic, it's kind of a nebulous definition. We tried to pick movies that were highly regarded when they came out and to a certain extent still are, won lots of awards, that type of thing. So we each picked two that we hadn't seen. So I picked two I hadn't seen. Chris picked two she hasn't seen. And then we're reviewing them. And so the ones I'm introducing are the ones I picked that I haven't seen and vice versa for Chris.
Well, and I
So
tried really hard to pick two you hadn't seen, but it's hard, like you said, it's very hard to
yeah, I
find.
know. The first few she recommended I was shot down, and I would have seen them if I hadn't. I'd seen them, but a while ago. But you happened to pick like the conversation, which we just did when Gene Hackman passed. So I was like, I just reviewed it too. So I didn't want the viewers to get bored with me
Well,
talking
if I
about
was
Gene
smart, I would
Hackman.
have looked at that watch list.
Yes, that's another thing to do. Always look at my Criterion watch list and see my 1,000+ watch movies, which
That's
just
what I
keeps
should have
growing
done.
despite the fact I keep trying to watch them. So we'll go to our first one, which was my pick, Fires on the Plain from 1959 by director Kan Ichikawa. This is a 1959 Japanese war film, and it's based on I think, a pretty famous novel that I'm not going to try to say the author's name. And it's a very interesting movie in that apparently, according to our good friend Wikipedia, it actually received mixed reviews at the time it came out. It was considered too bleak, which I love. All the greatest movies of the 50s and 60s that are now a lot of times the best regarded. Ace in the Hole by Billy Wilder is one I think of, was totally panned when it came out because people in the 50s were like, we want, happy, happy, like The Shaggy Dog was the top movie the year that Fires on the Plain came out. So people were like, we want happy, and this movie is not happy. It is about a Japanese private during the war who has tuberculosis and his attempt to try to stay alive. He and his unit are kind of stranded on an island in the Philippines. And this has actually happened. I've seen this in several Japanese movies where the Japanese government apparently just kind of left their soldiers out on these islands in the Philippines to fend for themselves. And many of them were starving to death. And has been noted in other films, some of them were still there after the war ended, and they didn't even know the war had ended yet. And that
Mhm.
definitely happens in this movie. You could call it an anti-war film. You could also just call it a movie about the desperation to stay alive and the attempt to survive, and how far you're willing to go to survive. Because as we see, some people go to certain lengths that our main character is not willing to do. I
Mhm.
thought this movie, it's considered a classic now. It's on Criterion. It is considered one of the great Japanese anti-war movies, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. I was riveted.
Yeah. I will say that I for sure would never have stumbled across this film on my own, I don't think. So I was really grateful that you had picked it. I will say I didn't necessarily love it, but what I will say is for days and days and days and days and days, and still even now, scenes from it keep coming into my mind.
Hmm.
And so there's some really memorable sections of the film, like that shoe section is almost like Chaplin, where the people are basically
Oh
trying
yeah.
up to better shoes, until finally someone doesn't have shoes at all. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it's such a amazing moment of levity in what's a really dark, dark film. And I don't think I've seen any of the other films by this director except for maybe one. And so I went into it pretty much cold. Um, spoiler alert, I still don't quite know what to make of the ending, whether or not he was like killed or just, keeled over finally. I don't know. Do you know
I
definitively?
think it's pretty clear he was killed, and he died regardless of how it
Right,
happened,
right,
right?
right.
So,
I
I,
watched that over and over again, trying to decide what I thought had happened in there because he was trying to get away from the war and go towards, normal life, I think is the phrase that in the translation. And then all of a sudden it's just like boom, gone. And so that
and it
was
was
a
months
very
after the war had ended too, which he doesn't know, but we know because they showed the
yeah,
date at the
yeah,
end. That's what
yeah,
made it more, to me, that's what made it so gun wrenching. These guys are still out there and they're still
yeah.
getting shot at, and they don't even, the war hasn't even ended because, in addition to the enemy, as they put it when they talk about the Americans, there is also the locals, the guerrilla fighters, the Filipinos, who are just like, we want these people gone, like all of
Right,
them.
right,
And
right,
I just thought so many of these things. You mentioned the shoes one, which is a great scene. And I will say that's one thing I wasn't expecting. It is a very bleak film, but there are moments of dark comedy, and the shoes scene is one of them where the soldiers keep going along, picking up, the shoes of the another dead body until they see another one that's even better shoes.
right.
But
And this one,
then
they're literally like one right after the other in the same spot,
yeah, it's
shoe
done, and it's a
after
beautifully
shoe.
edited sequence. But
Very.
also beyond some of the comedy that is there, because there's some really funny scenes like that, or dark comedy at least. There's just these horrible. The main actor has these wonderfully expressive eyes, and as he loses weight and becomes more and more gaunt, it sticks out even more. And that just the harrowing nature of what they're going through, living in this awful, conditions that they're in, starving to death essentially, trying to
Mhm.
find a way out. There's a scene where they're trying to cross this certain area to get to an area that they think there's going to be a plane to maybe pick them up, but the American tanks show up and start shooting at them. And one of the guys, who you can tell has probably been in the war for a long time, he's really like amazed, and he says, "This is the first time I've seen the enemy." And you think, my God, like
How
they've
is
been
that
at war,
possible?
because this is 1945. He's been at war
Mhm.
this long, and he's never seen who the enemy looks like because they're always just getting shot at and running.
Right.
So it's really, I think it's just a really tremendous film.
Yeah. I would say upon reflection, it grew in my regard for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
and the actors are all just really well cast, and it's
Yeah.
beautifully framed. And the fires on the plane is another area of ambiguity because they see these fires, these plumes of smoke, but they don't know who's setting them. They don't
Right.
know if it's a signal. They keep saying, is it a smoke signal? Are the
Right.
Americans setting it? Are our people setting it? Are the
Right. Or
guerrillas setting
farmers.
it?
Yeah.
And you
Just not,
never actually really find out exactly who is setting them. I mean, it's kind of intimated at the end it was the farmers, but we don't,
or at least he's hoping. I think he's hoping that it's the farmers and he can sort
right.
of head in that direction. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
amazing. It was impressive. All right, our next film is and I should apologize in advance about my lack of French skills, but anyway, is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, a 1964 film by Jacques Demy, with music by Michael Legrand, who apparently is quite a big deal as music goes, but I have to say, did not know anything about either one of these fine people. So I was glad to. This is sort of a film that I've heard a lot about over the years, and have always been a little bit curious about. I knew it was a musical. That's really, and it had Catherine Deneuve in it. But that was really about all I knew about it going into. So you have her, gorgeous as ever, in not her first film, but one of an early film of hers. And then this equally good-looking gentleman, Nino Castellnuovo, as the two lovers, around which this story centers. If you're wondering sort of why is it a classic, it won the Palme d'Or at the 64 Cannes Film Festival, and it got nominated for about, I mean, four or five, I think, Academy Awards the year that it came out. It's told in three parts. We get the departure, the absence, and the return, covering about 5 or 6 years in this relationship. And essentially, you've got two young people from families that are struggling in their own ways. You've got Geneviève, or Genevieve, but Genevieve, whose mother owes a lot of money in taxes, and so they get saved by this rich Parisian jeweler who basically bails them out and who has some feelings about wanting to be with Genevieve. And then you get Guy or Guy, who is working as a in a gas station or maybe as a mechanic and dreams of having his own gas station and is taking care of an ailing aunt. And so they want to be together, but then war calls him away. And so because it was 1964, they had sex the night before he left, and of course she's pregnant. So he's gone, she's pregnant. And various things happen. She makes a different choice in terms of who to marry. He comes back and is wrecked by her choice, and then eventually finds his kind of love. And the movie culminates with them sort of reconnecting in a sort of wistful way where they, I guess you're led to believe, are happy with their choices, happy with the choices they've made. They've both named their children the same thing because it was a name they had in common. So she names the daughter Francoise and he names his son Francois. So that's a bit of poignancy. I will say, didn't love it.
What?
I know.
What is wrong with you?
I know. I love a musical, but I did not expect every word to be sung.
Yes, it's like an opera. If you don't like opera, you probably won't like this movie because every word is sung.
Had I known the opera thing, because I thought, okay, why is this a classic? Why does everybody love it? I think the look of it, for sure. It's very colorful and it's very stylistic. I mean, I think visually it's quite amazing. Once I thought of it as an opera, I was like, okay, if I think of it as an opera, then I can admire it a lot more. But I will say I had a really hard time until I kind of settled into it to sort of love the every word is sung. Because there's a little bit of, it's not that it's melodic, like it's not mainstream melodic music. And
No.
so if you're looking for mainstream melodic music, which perhaps is what I went into it thinking musical, it's definitely not that. But anyway, what about you?
Unlike most musicals, which have crappy music, this movie has excellent music. And so Michel Legrand, of course, has won a ton of Grammys, Oscars, considered one of the great modern French composers. He did all the music to this one as well as Jacques Demy's other film with Catherine Deneuve, The Young Girls of Rochefort. This is a better movie than that one. This is considered one of the greatest musicals of all time for good reason. The main theme that Michel Legrand wrote is gorgeous. The theme to Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and the soundtrack, which we own here at home on LP, is fantastic. So yes, it has fantastic music. Everything is sung, which is one of the things I like about it because it doesn't try to hide like a lot of musicals do, like, okay, now we're going to break out in a song and dance number. It's like, nope, we're just going to sing the whole time. It's like Romeo and Juliet, but not everyone dies at the end. The story is, it's not that interesting other than it is the two war-torn lovers. It shows the war tearing these people apart, and that part's very sad. It's Catherine Deneuve at her most beautiful. She's just, it's like she's like sparkling. I can't even, the beauty radiating off her. And the whole film, the Technicolor, it looks like watercolor paintings. I love the look of this movie.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love it, and I love the music. And it's, yeah, you're right. It's not typical what we think of as Broadway musical music, but again, I'm very critical of that type of music. This is like real music, and so it's, it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think if you're a music fan or if you're a fan, it's just an important movie in French history too. It really made Jacques Demy famous. He's also known to some people as the husband of Agnes Varda, which is sort of, I like to say that now because he was much more famous in their heyday when they were both alive. And then he died much younger than her, and then she kept going. And now a lot of people know Agnes Varda and don't know Jacques Demy, which it just kind of cracks me up because when, in the 60s, it was like she was just the wife of Jacques Demy, you know what I mean? When she was starting her film career. Michel Legrand, who did the music to this, as you mentioned, was also in quite a few Agnes Varda films, including Cleo from 5 to 7. So, and lots of other French films. And he did the music to many others. But yeah, just a great film. I'm shocked. I've almost never met anyone who didn't like this movie. So I'm
not saying I didn't like it. I just think I had a different expectation going into it when I heard musical. I think I mean, even with a classic like this, I really tried not to read anything going into it. I wanted to just walk into it cold and experience it.
Yeah.
And so I think it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I did rewatch it after I had that in mind. And I will say I enjoyed it much more with that thought. And it would be interesting to listen to the soundtrack and just enjoy it as music. you know.
Yeah. It
So
is. It is fantastic. And of course, the umbrellas and yeah,
yeah.
there's just so many beautiful scenes. The plot is, whatever. I was actually surprised when you went so into the plot. I was like, oh, I forgot. It's funny because I just barely even think about the plot in this movie because to me, it's more about the music and just the look of it and the actors and the expressions. And it's pure musical in a way, in that way. But it's often considered one of the greatest musicals of all time. It's usually in the top 10 with movies like Singing in the Rain. So that's why when you said you hadn't seen it yet, I said, well, we got to correct that. We got to get
Well, and
that one off your bucket list. So.
I do love Singing in the Rain, but that's a very much more typical musical
Oh, sure. And
than this
and I
one.
actually like Singing in the Rain better because it's more fun,
Hmm.
obviously, and it
Hmm.
has more dancing. This one doesn't have dancing, which I always, yeah, dancing, and I'd probably like this movie even more. So
That's
anyway,
funny. Well, you
we
get a
should
little
move on.
dancing in our next film. So
Yeah.
our next film is To Sir with Love, which I was shocked that you hadn't seen. And I'm not exactly sure how I avoided seeing it because it feels like one of those that you might have stumbled across even by accident. It's a 1967 British film that deals basically with social and racial issues in a secondary school in the East End of London and stars Sidney Poitier. And it was a big deal that Lulu, the young singer, was debuting
Hmm.
in this film. She plays one of the kids and obviously sings the famous theme song. So why is this one a classic? So in looking that up, obviously the song "To Sir with Love," sung by Lulu, was quite popular and might have been the best-selling single of that year. Poitier was the first Black actor to win a Golden Globe for this, so that was great. And the little Wikipedia tidbit that I enjoyed about this is that this film is ranked number 26 on Entertainment Weekly's list of the 50 best high school movies, right between Pretty in Pink and Back to the Future.
That's funny.
So I found that quite funny. Anyway, so Poitier plays Mr. Thackeray, a trained engineer from British Guyana who essentially cannot get hired as an engineer due to racism. Nobody wants to hire him as a person of color. And so he decides to take this job in a school just to keep himself going and doesn't have any training. And he's told that these are kids who are rowdy and won't behave. And they're all kids, I think, who basically flunked out of other schools. So they've got behavior issues. The teachers tell him, there's not much you're going to be able to do. So he's just sort of naively going in there trying to do his best. And of course, the kids harass him as well until the day he decides to throw all the books away and start having conversations with them as adults to prepare them for moving out into the real world in a few weeks. And suddenly everybody's behavior turns around
Yeah.
with a few, setbacks here and there. A little bit simplistic for sure in terms of the resolution of all of the tension and things like that. And there are some bumps along the way where trust is lost and trust has to be regained. And so many things I think about it are very, I mean, it's quite sweet, sugary sweet, like saccharine sweet,
Hmm.
and predictable, and for sure politically incorrect. I think I don't know if I said that before, but yeah, and you can certainly see how it leads to future films where someone in a school or a classroom has to turn around a group of kids. We've seen that sort of trope again and again since this movie. I will say I was taken by a particularly poignant scene at the funeral of one of the classmates. I think that reveal is done in a very lovely way, and I did enjoy the kind of final celebration where you get your singing and your dancing.
That dancing was Sidney Poitier. Good thing he kept his day job as an acclaimed Oscar-winning actor because he's a dancer. He is not.
It's true, and maybe not much of a boxer, although I guess he's sort of pulling his punches. But anyway, yeah. So I would say not a completely successful film for me in 2025. Maybe it resonated in a different way in 1967. I think it's one of those that's so dated in its views and viewpoint that it's a little bit hard maybe to enjoy now. But I can
Yeah.
appreciate that he's a fine actor and Lulu is delightful. And the guy who plays the main kind of rowdy guy gives a really kind of nice performance and arc, although
Mhm.
again, a little realistic. But anyway, what did you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't seen this one, and in part because I had heard it had aged poorly, and some of Sidney Poitier's movies, unfortunately, from the '60s, haven't aged that well, and this is one of them. And I
Mhm.
agree with a lot of people that say it's aged poorly. The gender is particularly in the areas more around gender than racism. Honestly, the portrayals of the racism were kind of still spot on and pretty relevant. I think the gender roles were obviously very sexist in the movie. There's a point where Sidney Poitier says to the girls, like, you guys need to stop, you ladies need to stop dressing like sluts. I thought, whoa, okay, they're not really that
And don't poop
provocatively
around
dressed,
in it.
but by
Yeah.
67, yeah, I guess it was. However, you have to judge a movie from the time frame it was made. Like, people were in blackface in '30s movies. Is that okay? No. Does it make the movie bad? Not necessarily. Depends. So one of the things I liked about this movie was Sidney Poitier's performance, of course, is really fantastic. But I actually thought the way they dealt with his race was more a little bit more subtle than I thought it would be, to be honest.
Mhm.
Maybe because it is British, but there's a lot of, people talking. There's kind of a lot of undertones of racism, but fairly, it's not one of these movies like in the '60s movies, American movies with Sidney Poitier, people are just always calling him the N-word, just like constantly. That doesn't really happen here, but another teacher at one point says to him something like, this is more of the kind of racism he deals with, which seems very British to me, by the way. Instead of it being in your face, it's very like, oh, well, maybe you'll be able to work some of your voodoo on those students. Those,
Right.
it's kind of those little like jabs, like death by a thousand pricks type things. But on the other hand, he has several teachers who are very kind to him and really like him. So I liked some of that. The students are ridiculously old looking, but like that's in a lot of high school movies like
It's
Grace too.
true.
Because when he says to you, I'm going to start treating you like adults, I thought, good, because they all look like they're about 30. So I think they can handle it. And the scene where he shows them how to make a salad, I don't know why, but that just cracked me up.
And especially because later it comes back and it's like it's terrible,
No, no, I know, because
Yeah.
he was like, you can put, raisins, and
Right.
he starts listing
Pineapple.
pineapple and apples. I was like, what kind of salad is this? Is this a fruit salad? And then he's like, and here's the mayonnaise. I was like, oh no,
Yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah.
British food we're getting into. But
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I thought some of the script was very charming. The look of the movie is pretty awful. It's very flat and almost has a made for TV look. It's very like flat and grainy. The
Mhm.
shots are very just standard, a lot of medium shots, just not, you compare it to the last two movies we watched, Fires on a Plane and Umbrellas of Cherbourg,
Oh,
which are
for sure.
just obviously classic in part because of their photography. This one's very boring looking. So to me, not a classic still by today's standards, but in some ways it was more nuanced than I was expecting. We've seen so many of these savior teacher movies. You think of Michelle Pfeiffer in
Right.
Dangerous Minds, and it's often a white teacher who comes into a bad neighborhood. So I also liked that it was an all mostly white class with a couple exceptions and a black teacher coming in to save the white working class kids. So that was kind
Yeah.
of a nice twist.
I thought of that too. And what's that Edward James Olmos one? Oh, Stand and Deliver. That was
Stand
the
and
other one that I
Deliver.
kept thinking about while watching.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's a lot like, and they made a ton of those movies since then. And so people compare it to that, but it's like there weren't as many of them then. I think
Yeah.
Blackboard Jungle was before this one, but
And it alludes
anyway,
to a possible relationship with that other teacher, between Sidney Poitier and that other
they
teacher.
never go there
They keep
though.
edging up into it, but then they never get there. And I kept wondering, like, well, what would that have done? Could that have been possible in that film at that time? Maybe
Yeah, I'm
not.
not sure they could even have shown it. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah.
it's also hard to find. I had to pay on demand to watch it, which always
Yeah.
irritates me. So,
Yeah. I did too.
um, So our next film, Hombre, from 1967, directed by Martin Ritt, who worked with Paul Newman, who stars in this, on six other films, most of which are just fantastic. I was reading about Martin Ritt on Letterboxd, and all these people are like, this guy's underrated. Why doesn't he up there with some of the greats? Because he made a lot of freaking good movies, and a lot of them with Paul Newman, Long Hot Summer, Paris Blues, HUD. I mean, just fantastic movies. The problem is people always compare. HUD is such a masterpiece that people forget about this one. This is a revisionist Western. It's based on a story by Elmore Leonard, of all people, or a novel. And it stars Paul Newman as a white man who has been raised by Apaches. No, it's not Dances with the Wolves. Just hang on here. And he goes on a stagecoach and with a bunch of white people who all immediately mostly disdain him because he's rough and, oh, he likes Indians. And so he's kind of set aside by them until they get held up by outlaws. And then all of a sudden they're like, Paul Newman, we need you. And he's like, okay, the shoe is turned. Screw you guys. I really liked this movie. I was surprised how much I liked this because Westerns kind of depends with me. I do tend to like revisionist ones better. This one has a little bit of Stagecoach and a little bit of The Searchers in it from John Ford, particularly the racism aspect with The Searchers and the Stagecoach, obviously. I liked how there's all these characters. Frederick March is in it, Richard Boone, Diane Cliento, great character actors who were in a ton of movies in this period, all doing their thing. Richard Boone in particular is the bad guy, you know, the one with the big nose who's just
Very
just
good.
so good, so good.
Yeah.
Everyone's hot and sweaty like you should be in the desert in
And
the
dirty and
Southwest.
yeah, all of it.
Yeah. But Paul Newman has what, like 5 lines in this whole movie?
I'm gonna say he's doing
Everything.
a lot with his face.
Yes, everything is through those gorgeous blue eyes. And, you know, you forget how much we miss movie stars in this day and age. Till you see Paul Newman when he first comes on screen and he turns around and you're like, oh, there's Paul Newman and there's those eyes and I'm locked in. I'm ready to go. And I just thought it was beautifully shot movie. It was shot by James Wong Howe, one of the great cinematographers of this period, and very assuredly directed. I felt like I was in capable hands. They knew where they wanted to go with the story and they were going to get us there.
Hmm. Well, and I have to admit I haven't seen many of the films by Martin Ritt, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
Martin. I've
Martin
seen a
Ritt,
lot
yeah.
of his stuff in the like 80s, but not so much in the older films. And so I was happy to sort of, step back and clearly I have a long list of films I should be watching.
We could do a part
Okay.
2 or part 3 or
Yeah,
part
I was
4
gonna
of this,
say
Chris.
just on him, but I will say initially I thought, oh no, I thought Paul Newman was supposed to be portraying an Apache.
No, no, that would be
Very
bad.
first
That would
scene.
not, that would make this movie poorly dated. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, oh dear, oh no, and then that's quickly resolved, thankfully. And so after that, I was like, okay, thank goodness. For sure, once the stagecoach gets held up, this becomes a much more interesting film to me. I loved the dynamics of what is being done in like one room, one hill, one, they don't have a lot of set, and there's not a lot
Mm-mm.
of plot, and there's so much happening and who you root for and who you loathe shifts a little bit and
Yeah.
would you make the same choices and put yourself at risk. I mean, there's so many interesting things that are happening in this kind of subtle little film.
Yeah, yeah, I loved it, and I love this all the side characters. Every Frederick March, who of course is a classic actor from back in the 30s when he was like a leading man. Here he's older, and so he's kind of playing this wussy guy, right? He's the guy that has this money. He's a banker, and then Richard Boone's the toughie. Diane, I think it's a Salento. I think I said her name wrong the first time I said it. I can't even say her name, but I've seen her in other movies, and she's the redheaded woman that
Right,
is
she's
kind of the
great.
innkeeper, who's just fantastic and is a
Yeah.
great foil against Paul Newman. Very sassy
Mhm.
to his kind of stoic character. But there's some great line. What little he says with. There's a scene in the stagecoach where one of the women is making fun because the main couple, Frederick March and his wife, have lived on the reservation with the Indians. And she makes a comment like, oh, I thought they were so noble, but then I saw them eating dogs and oh, they're just disgusting people. And Paul Newman says, you would never eat a dog, lady? And she says, no, I would never eat a dog. And he said, well, you've never been so hungry that your belly hurts until you can't think anymore. And
Mhm.
that's the only reason those people are doing that. But the way he says it, you're just like, yep, Paul
You would
Newman just
believe
told
it.
you, lady. And she just looks at him and just, whatever.
Well, doesn't that come back again in a later part, like the
Yep,
sort of
when
idea
she's out in
again?
the sun and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
right, right.
she's in deep trouble. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't blame him if he wanted to leave all those people. He's probably not going to do that because he's Paul Newman, but,
Well, and you can imagine people would have lost their minds if that's how that movie had ended. But yeah, great. I thought it was great. I'm
yeah,
glad you
really a
picked it.
great
Thank you for
find.
picking it.
No, I'm glad I finally got to see it. I've been wanting to see it for years because I saw HUD, which is fantastic, by the way, and I was like, I'd never seen it until pretty recently. This one's another one. So, four pretty great films. I'd say in my pick, Fires on a Plane, 4 stars, Umbrellas, all the stars. And actually, Hombre, I'm giving 4 stars to because I really think that one surprised me. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. To Sir with Love, I'd say watch it knowing it's horribly dated for the Sidney Poitier performance, but just be
Right,
aware.
right. Yeah, I think if you stumble across it,
Yeah,
stop
maybe
and
don't
watch
go out
it.
and pay $4 like we did though. Wait till it's on TV, TBS or
Something
TCM
Canopy
one of
or
these nights.
something.
Canopy, yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you for Chris. We'll have you back for more classics, and thank you all. Have a great day and great movies.